Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence, we go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here, How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
Can't catch it in time. Hey, guys, today's date, May the 28th, 2022. And this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, most Will Buchanan. How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before I do get started, guys, let you know that we are a family-friendly podcast, as we try to be, and there may be some things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, it would be remiss to say that the shooting in Uvalde, Texas, has not dominated the airwaves and the internet and all of social media. But as most school shootings usually happen, the more details that come out, will definitely change our perspective, really, in our feelings and emotions on a lot of things that have happened. Case in point, of course, happening in Texas, that we didn't have, for a lot of people that did not know, this past Friday, the NRA actually had a convention in Texas. Go figure. Of course, the NRA, considering the fact that I thought for the longest time the NRA was finally bankrupt and was finally heading off to that great place where all races, possibly all white, do not want actually minorities in their group places to die. I thought that would be one of them, but who knew they were actually still going on strong and still financing lobbyists. I'm sorry, still financing lobbying to get politicians to do what they want. However, in this case, from what we do understand, that Governor Greg Abbott, as Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, did cancel their in-person appearances. Donald Trump still showed up. No surprise there. Now, you're probably wondering, after Greg Abbott, who is a staunch gun rights supporter and supported the Second Amendment, why he didn't show up. I like to think most of it had to be due with most of it, or I should say all of it, probably has something to do with Beto O'Rourke.
Excuse me. Sit down. You're out of line and an embarrassment.
Sit down and don't play this stuff.
The next shooting is right now, and you are doing nothing.
No, he needs to get his ass out of here. This isn't the place to talk this over.
This is totally predictable. When you,
Sir, you're out of line. Sir, you are out of line. Sir, you are out of line. Please leave this auditorium. I can't believe you're a sick son of a bitch that would come to a deal like this to make a political issue.
Yeah, you want me to come in? So we're following some developments here at this news conference here in Uvalde right now. That is Beto O'Rourke, who is telling the governor of Texas right now another shooting is going to happen, essentially putting the onus on the governor and the leadership in Texas right now, confronting him face-to-face at this news conference over the killings that happened at this elementary school. We should mention Beto O'Rourke is also running for office here in the state of Texas, statewide office. He is being escorted out right now by police. A stunning moment here, around 24 hours after the shooting just occurred. A lot of screaming back and forth there in the hall. We were about to hear from the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick. And it appears there are other protesters inside.
There are family members. There are family members who are crying as we speak. There are family members whose hearts are broken. There's no words that anybody shouting can come up here and do anything to heal those broken hearts. Every Texan, every American has a responsibility where we need to focus not on ourselves and our agendas. We need to focus on the healing and hope that we can provide to those who have suffered unconscionable damage to their lives and loss of life.
So, yeah, I think Beto O'Rourke had something to do with it. Keep in mind, Beto O'Rourke did win the Democratic nomination for governor in Texas. And as I've been saying ever since last year, we're less than 4 months away and counting. The midterms are coming. And I think Greg Abbott was doing a little bit of damage control because, again, keep in mind, in his case, which Beto O'Rourke was right, their blood is on your hands. Keep in mind, Greg Abbott, when he became governor of Texas, besides denying women's rights, he did sign 2 bills in the measure. One of those bills was actually lowering the age of buying firearms from 21 to 18 for long rifles. That's how an 18-year-old in his state of Texas was able to purchase guns legally because they were 18. The second one was actually preventing citizens. He calls it protecting the Second Amendment, but protecting their rights from federal overreach was actually motion number 2 that he signed into law. So one could say that, yes, in many ways, Governor Greg Abbott was responsible for the shooter purchasing firearms, simply put, because had the age been at 21, he would have never been legally allowed to purchase handguns and long rifles and body armor and ammo. So yes, Beto O'Rourke may have had a point that it was definitely on him. Moving right along, guys, like I said, more information has came out regarding the shooting in Uvalde, Texas. More importantly, the act or lack thereof actions on law enforcement's part, as we have found out that as an active shooter was actually inside the school, law enforcement not only was outside waiting for a tactical response, they prevented parents from going in when law enforcement would not. And I'm like, as troubling as it is, you can't make this stuff up.
The on-scene commander at the time believed that it had transitioned from an active shooter to a barricaded subject.
Sir, you have people who are alive, children who are calling 911 saying, please send the police. They are alive. In that classroom, there are lives that are at risk.
Hey, we're well aware of that.
Right. Yeah. Why was this decision made not to go in and rescue these children?
Again, the on-scene commander considered a barricaded subject and that there was time and there were no more children at risk. Obviously, based upon the information we have, there were children in that classroom that were at risk, and it was, in fact, still an active shooter situation and not a barricaded subject. And if the 911 operators were aware that children were alive in that classroom, why weren't officers notified of that? And if that's the case, why didn't they take action? That's the question. And again, I'll go back to the answer for right now, is that it was considered, okay, the decision was made on the scene, retrieve the keys and wait for a tactical team with the equipment to go ahead and breach the door and take on the subject at that point. That was the decision. That was the thought process at that particular point in time. And there was 19, like I said, there was 19 officers in there. In fact, there was plenty of officers to do whatever needed to be done, with one exception, is that the incident commander inside believed they needed more equipment and more officers to do a tactical breach at that point. That's why BORTAC was requested on the scene. As soon as they were there, they executed a search, or at least a dynamic entry, and went in. And of course, that was not till 12. That was not till 12:57. With the benefit of hindsight, stand by. Stand by. Right? I got it. Okay. Hey, for the benefit of hindsight, where I'm sitting now, of course it was not the right decision. It was a wrong decision. Period. There's no excuse for that. But again, I wasn't there, but I'm just telling you, from what we know, we believe there should have been an entry at that as soon as you can. Hey, when there's an active shooter, the rules change. It's no longer, okay, it's no longer a barricaded subject. You don't have time. You don't worry about outer perimeters. And by the way, Texas embraces active shooter training, active shooter certification, and that doctrine requires officers. We don't care what agency you're from. You don't have to have a leader on the scene. Every officer lines up, stacks up, goes and finds where those rounds are being fired at, and keeps shooting until the subject is dead. Period.
You've just been listening to live coverage from Stephen McGraw. He's the...
Yeah, I think he sounds like he was just good and tired of fed up and wanted to make his point and defend his officers. But really, again, you got to explain that. How does an 18-year-old with body armor barricaded inside decide upon themselves that, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to wreak havoc, and you have law enforcement officers that are going to say, wait a minute, we should wait for tactical. We should wait for SWAT. We should do everything else but go in. It's a little hard to defend that. And again, I'm kind of saying this because I know for a lot of people, like I said before, these are young children who didn't want to do anything more than go to school to learn and to grow and to just experience life. Their lives got cut short. But it has to be asked. You're going to stand and tell me law enforcement officers, more than one, against a lone shooter, wouldn't go in and breach and actually possibly save more lives. Could have possibly saved more lives. But you're telling me one body armored shooter that was armed with pistols and an AR, and you have multiple officers sitting outside going, I guess we gotta wait. It just doesn't sit right. And now law enforcement, especially those law enforcement in Texas, are now going to have to answer for it. Because again, with President Biden, he will be actually there in Texas come Sunday to actually meet with the families, and he will. I'm like, again, not only the president, but all of us are asking the same questions. I give law enforcement a whole lot of crap on the show. I do. Some of it mostly justified because the actions of a few, and then the silence that, doesn't sit there and say that it's not all of us, but you're not pointing out the bad cops. I'm sorry, but there were some cops, if you believe Sean King on social media. I'm not saying he's right or he's not wrong, but there is stories coming up that some officers went into the school to get their own kids out before they helped anybody else. But you still had some police outside handcuffing and resisting parents who were going to go into their school and get their kids out. So again, this is this whole thing of, yes, the law enforcement in Uvalde is going to have to explain themselves. And as more information comes out, the more a lot of people are going to be aggravated at the way police handle the situation. Because at the same time, we're not too far off from the shooter in Buffalo that decided to instinctively shoot black people at a supermarket. And it just makes you think they took him in alive. But they didn't wait. They had the numbers. They went in, and it was literally almost the same scenario. A person was able to legally buy firearms with body armor and ammo, was able to go into said store, kill black people, but officers actually went in and subdued him alive. I mean, yes, he was white. We saw that coming, but they still went in and subdued him alive. Same situation almost a week later. An 18-year-old literally and figuratively goes into a school and shoots kids and teachers, and you have parents wanting to go in and save their kids because the lack of action by law enforcement. It's a little hard to explain that. It is very hard to explain that because it looks like a lack of an action and negligence on law enforcement's part.
Left inside the building. That is apparently what went through the mind of the commander, unaware, as you say, of the fact that people were asking for help inside the classroom. And of course, it's always a difficult situation because you know that people have been injured, and the longer you wait, the more you raise the risk that people who are injured may die of their injuries if they don't receive medical treatment. So that's another thing that has to factor in. And I'm sure that this is going to be something that is long examined and debated. But we did learn a great deal of new information about why the decision was made to wait. We also heard, Peter, from some of these survivors, some of these young people that were there, that the doors to these classrooms had a window. And one of these students has said that the Ramos inside shot out the window. So I think that raises additional questions about why the officers on the scene were unable to try to engage him through that window. It may be, as we were told early on, that he was firing, he had this very high-powered weapon that is capable of shooting certainly through the classroom walls. We didn't hear much information about that, but that's an additional question. And then I think the other thing that is to be answered is the thinking seems to have been and seems still to be that the bulk of his shots were fired shortly after he went in. And that raises the question about when he was shooting at the school from outside in the parking lot, expending this enormous amount of ammunition that he had. Did he wound any students? Did he hurt any students or kill any students by firing at the school from outside? And when he went in, when he started shooting at classrooms as he sort of went down the hall, that's clearly information yet to be gathered. We had been told that victims were found in 4 classrooms. There wasn't any discussion of that today, but that could be the reason for that, Peter.
So again, it was the wrong decision. So there's going to be a lot of speculation. I do mean a lot of speculation. But one thing is evident. One thing is very evident. Law enforcement did not act in the manner that we expected them to, because now it's like, okay, here comes the spin job. How do we protect our Texas law enforcement from doing something that people in another state, that law enforcement in another state was able to do with no issue? They're going to have a hard time explaining it. But to switch gears for a second, the response, because now it's been a few days after the shooting, we're now seeing exactly what's the next thing, what happens next, what's the responses, what are Democrats, what are Republicans, and what are not just going down to the city location, what are the mayor and everyone else is going to do? Because now the question has come up again. Gun reform, gun control. The question has came up again. And even the mayor, which again, I hate to say it, the GOP, because they are so gun heavy, over a Second Amendment that is basically for you to take up arms against a tyrannical government, because it needs to be said, that's what the Second Amendment's about. It's not about your right to bear arms. It is your right to defend yourself against a government that might be corrupt and overrun. And so therefore, that's the only reason you can take up arms. Aside from that, no. And I understand this. I'm a gun owner. I am a firearms owner myself. I understand that. But I also understand that there are some out there called ammosexuals, if you will, that take it to such an extreme. And here's the thing, you ammosexuals out there. Nobody's coming for your guns. I wish that lie would die with Reaganomics. I really wish it would. Nobody's ever going to come for your guns. The thing about it is there needs to be gun reform, because, again, the question remains that why did a law pass by Governor Greg Abbott in Texas that a kid who is 18 years old can buy a firearm, but he can't buy alcohol, because if he's still 21 to buy alcohol, but in the great state of Texas at 18 years old, you can buy a gun. That question needs to be answered. And of course, the mayor doing what they usually do. When you're conservative and you're an ammosexual, you basically do what every other politician does when the question comes up. You slide to the left, slide to the right, distract y'all now.
Heard the cries and impassioned speeches that have taken place over the last few hours for people calling for some restrictions on gun control. I know you're not an advocate of it, but a lot of people are asking, how did an 18-year-old, just a few days or weeks after his 18th birthday, not buy one, but eventually 2 AR-15s, one of which was used in this massacre yesterday, without a gun license? He doesn't even have a driver's license. Why is that access? Why should that access be available?
Well, look, I mean, again, everybody has a right to own a gun. I'm not against expanded background checks. I'm not. But everybody comes in and talks about immediately we want to do gun control. We want to sanction the gun lobbyists. We want to sanction this. And we want to sanction that. But you know what? Why don't you politicians get off your butts and let's talk about mental health, and let's do something for real once. We give millions of dollars to all these countries, and right now we're spending billions down here on the border. What if we took that money and built facilities where we could treat the people in our home country? We got homeless people on the streets that have mental problems. We have kids that have mental problems, especially coming out of the pandemic. And everybody touts their horn and wants to beat their drum, but nobody wants to address the core problem. and that's mental health.
Did I hear you say, though, you wouldn't be or you would be open to restrictions of some sort?
I'm not. I mean, as far as restrictions, no, I'm not going to say I'd be in favor of restrictions.
What about having a license, a gun license?
You know, that will be something that'll have to be. I'm not going to, you know, to me, I'm a responsible gun owner. So I mean, you want to make me have a license, fine. I don't have anything to hide. But look, a license isn't going to change this. A license wouldn't have changed this. If a bad guy wants to get a gun, he's going to get a gun. It's proven over and over again. Look at Chicago. I mean, they get guns all over. You can't even buy a gun in the city of Chicago, but yet they have shootings every weekend. So, I mean, bad guys can get guns. You want to do an expanded background check? I'm all for it. I have no problem.
How can people watching who want to help the people in your community? What do you need?
Well, this morning we're setting up, we've already talked to the bank and the school district and the city, and we're getting an account set up at the First State Bank of Uvalde, where we're going to try to take donations, for monetary donations for these families. We're going to have we're going to pick somebody to administer that fund so that 100% of this money goes to these families.
Mayor Don McLaughlin,
Okay, so I always love, and, this thing kills me when it's like, what is it about GOP and those conservatives, whenever gun control comes up, Chicago is like it is like, what was that one thing they couldn't forget for the longest time? What was it? Starts with a B. Starts with a B. They threw Hillary under the bus for it. Benghazi. There we go. Chicago is their Benghazi. That's what there is. When it was Hillary, it was like, but what about Benghazi? What about what happened at Benghazi? We didn't look into Benghazi. The GOP became so obsessed with Benghazi, it wasn't even funny. Why? Hillary was running to be president at the time. And now, whenever gun reform comes up, you know what the GOP does? I'm going to play my card. Chicago. Not the band, the city. They talk about Chicago because, again, Chicago is like, well, Chicago has some of the strictest gun laws in the country, and yet bad guys are still able to get guns. So that tells you that gun laws don't do anything. And it gets echoed everywhere else. Here's the point I'm making out of all this, because this is for all those that are watching. Let me tell you why the moot point about Chicago is bullshit. For one, the last multiple shootings that have happened in this country were not by bad guys, not by criminals, not by those who illegally purchased firearms. The last multiple shootings were done by individuals who literally walked into a store or anywhere else and purchased a gun legally. Has nothing to do with Chicago. Chicago in itself is a multiclism of wage income gaps, devoid of financial vocational educational opportunities. At the same time, what happens in a situation where you remove everything but the people in a certain location and starve them of all economic and financial and other opportunities? Crime will rise. At the same time, Chicago police already has a history of corruption and the fact of bogus charges and things they've done to people. Lori Lightfoot is going to have a hard time trying to actually get reelected, because the thing about Chicago is it's not just the crime. There's a multitude of other things that actually happen to where crime rises, and the fact of mass shootings. But that's, again, doesn't take away from the fact that gun reform is still required, still needed in multiple areas. But that's what conservatives hang on. Conservatives hang on the fact that bad guys, because conservatives will never call homegrown people terrorists. It's always, well, bad guys need to hold guns, or this person had mental issues. This person, we need to look more into mental health. Not forgetting the fact that Greg Abbott also put in the bill that actually cut funds for mental health nearly down to zero. So the actual services for mental health in Texas were severely hampered because their funds were diverted somewhere else. But it's amazing when those same conservatives out there say, well, we need to look more into mental health and everything else that's going on in order to solve this issue, while severely undercutting it. It's kind of like going back to women's rights. It's amazing how they talked about protecting women's rights, but at the same time, you go in to veto a bill that would codify women's rights in the event that Roe versus Wade is overturned. It's like saying we must defend women, but you're still gonna have whatever baby's inside of you. It's crazy. But at the same time, the gunman himself, similar to the shooter in Buffalo, had so many warning signs that could have been caught up if we had gun reform. What warning signs do you ask? Oh, well, we found out from a person in Germany. And yes, you can't make this up.
Griffin now takes a look at the gunman's texts before the massacre. I want to note this report does include several images of the shooter.
This is the text conversation just moments before the 18-year-old suspect would attempt to kill his grandmother, then, in his words, shoot up an elementary school. You know what I'm going to do right now, he writes. Tell me, is the response. I can't, since my grandpa hasn't left. I'm waiting for this dude to leave. Shortly after 11 a.m. Texas time, the suspect then complains about his grandmother and his phone bill. I'm waiting for this bitch. I'm going to do something to her right now. She's on with AT&T about my phone. It's annoying. 5 minutes pass, then I just shot my grandma in the head. I'm going to go shoot up an elementary school right now. That last message, sent at 6:21 p.m. German time, which would have been 11:21 a.m. in Uvalde, Texas. 11 minutes later, police received their first call of a shooting at Robb Elementary School. The person on the receiving end of those texts, a 15-year-old girl in Germany. She had never met the suspect in person. They connected through a live streaming app called Yubo, then FaceTime, texted. He sent her videos of himself. She's not the only person he was communicating with. The shooter's Instagram account showed a photo of 2 AR-style weapons and tagged another young woman, who he messaged the morning of the shooting saying, I'm about to, but didn't finish his sentence. And then I got a little secret.
Jake, the teenage girl who spoke to CNN from Germany did so with her mother's consent, and she says that reaching out to him through social media was her only connection.
Crazy, isn't it? That literally and figuratively, he was sitting there. I mean, it's just almost, I can't help but wonder. It's just like the Buffalo. It's like the guy in Buffalo who had a 180-page manifesto of everything that he did, of everything that he talked about the replacement theory, how minorities were trying to replace with a great white race and things of that nature. This individual decided to, treat it almost like a sadistic game. Oh, I have a secret. Oh, I just shot my grandmother in the head and texted it. Even more so, I'm going to go shoot a school right now and actually go do it. So yes, there may have been multiple things that could have been put in place to prevent that guy from ever stepping foot into a classroom, much less a school. But again, I have to point this out because here's the funny part. And here, I won't call it funny because people say, well, Fox News has some interesting points. Yes, Fox News had a lot of interesting points about the school shooting. None of it was about the fact of gun reform. They blamed everything else but gun reform. Don't believe me? Here's a few.
I mean, this is just beyond shocking. I would like to see a national push toward, instead of parents buying their kids all these tools and toys and games, invest in the classroom to make it safer. There are companies out there that will do that. They'll come out and they'll do threat assessment of the whole school. They'll say, this is an area of vulnerability that you might want to address, and this is how we would address it. And they have blankets that you can put up on the wall that are colorful and beautiful, but they're ballistic blankets. I mean, there are ways to obscure the classroom windows so that the shooter can't have target acquisition. I mean, there's just a million tools out there, but and we've been banging this drum for years. Let's start investing in our kids and
Yes, let's start investing in our kids by giving them ballistic blankets, by actually bringing in individuals to assess a publicly funded school on security measures. Let's do this as parents. I don't know where to begin with that one. I don't know where to begin with that one, just because the simple fact of the matter is, guys, it is crazy for the level. It is crazy for the level that they're trying to go into. That it's almost comical that they don't want to say gun reform. They blame everything else. Again, here's another one. Again, this is all conservative, and you should not be surprised by the mindset. You really, really shouldn't be surprised by the mindset.
Danny Coulson is a former deputy assistant director of the FBI, and he commanded and founded the FBI's hostage rescue team. Danny, I imagine FBI agents are on the scene right now. What's happening?
Collecting evidence. It's kind of a tragedy, isn't it? I want to commend a guest you had on, the SWAT team commander from Oklahoma, I think. He talked about what they do. Something much better than that is to have armed police officers inside the school protecting our kids. 7 of my 8 grandchildren are in schools in Texas, and they're this age. We just gave $40 billion to Ukraine. Why don't we allocate money to protect our own citizens, to put policemen in our schools to protect our children from these monsters? I'm really angry about this. I'm saddened, and frankly, I'm a lot afraid.
Well, Kellyanne Conway on the 5 made an excellent point that there are billions of dollars that were given to schools across the country for COVID relief. And that money has not been spent. That money is just sitting there waiting to be spent. And I think maybe a common sense idea would maybe take some of that money, a couple billion would do it, and harden some of these soft targets, especially the elementary schools. Because we learned that a lot of the Texas middle schools and high schools will have armed security guards there, but the elementary schools do not. And I think it would make a lot of sense to make sure that we have armed security agents there, at least one for every elementary school in the entire country. It would be common sense, Danny.
Yeah, it would be. I totally agree with that. And I mean, I was in the business of rescuing people from situations like this. It's a lot better to be inside, keeping the bad guys out, than trying to go in and find the bad guys. And why don't we do that? We have the money. And one other thing I think it's important to remember, the gun genie is out of the bottle. You can outlaw guns tomorrow. They're still out there. And we need to protect ourselves. We need to have courage to bring in policemen that will risk their lives and save our children and put a stop to this stuff. Stop it before they get through the front door.
Yeah, nothing's more scary. Nothing is more scarier than basically saying, oh, by the way, we need to bring in armed security because schools are soft targets. At the same time, let's bring in police to actually do that. I don't know about you guys, but with the record on police right now, I don't want cops to be anywhere near my children, especially racist ones. But again, it goes right back to arming teachers. I'm like, I'm sorry, you won't even let teachers educate kids on certain books, but you want them to be freaking Rambo. Okay. But again, this is all conservative media. Conservative media, above all else, will turn around and make it seem like guns aren't the problem. Everything else is. Again, we can keep going.
About what the FBI profiler said and what Greg had mentioned about hardening these softer targets, where is the obstacle to having one single armed security guard in every single public school, K through 12 in the country? It doesn't seem like that's that huge of a deal. Where would be the pushback on that, Judge?
The pushback is that people today, many of them are intimidated. They are triggered. If there is someone with a gun, they're frightened. That's this new narrative. When you see a gun, you should be frightened, as opposed to appreciating what they are doing for you. And I know that Texas has SROs, school resource officers, in definitely the middle schools and the high schools. The elementary schools, I wouldn't be surprised. But this will be a political issue. Make no mistake. And again, I don't want to get into it, but it's going to be about guns and the safety of someone having a gun and protecting you with a gun. But I'll tell you, this is every parent's nightmare. I mean, when I heard this, I was shaking. And if you're not a parent, then you've got you can feel for these children and the long-lasting impact on this. We have a duty to protect citizens. We have a duty to protect children. We have to recognize that crime is becoming pervasive again, the way it was in the 90s. This is crime. This is a society where there's no respect and a belief that you can get away with it. Whether this guy decided to kill himself originally, I don't know. I have no way of knowing. But it is the decadence that we're seeing in terms of support for society.
Good work. And again, I apologize to disclosure from the video, guys. We are triggered by guns in schools. I'm sorry. Janine Pereira, Piero, whatever the hell the name is. People aren't triggered by the word of guns in schools. People are worried because, again, we have some of the loosest laws. Texas being one of them. Texas being one of the loosest states to have gun laws. While America, we still are fighting this whole wall of just how can I put this ever so nicely? We are facing this resistance to reform. And I don't know why. I that's the part that kills me, is that you really don't know why we have such a resistance from actually just doing right. But this is the point, guys, I keep bringing up that, and this one, and this, I know there's like I said, there's plenty. There's a lot of examples of Fox News out there that you can see that they'll talk about anything but the actual issue. But this one, this has to be my number one. This has to be.
Fox and Friends Weekend co-host Rachel Campos Duffy just returned from this very area, Uvalde, Texas, and she joins us now. Rachel, glad to have you with us this morning. As you wake up, what's your reaction?
Good morning to all of you. And yeah, when I woke up this morning, my heart was so heavy. I couldn't help putting myself in the shoes of those parents to go, what would it be like to wake up this morning knowing what had just happened yesterday? It's just unimaginable. And yes, I was just in Uvalde, just like Lawrence, and I spoke with the mayor there, and this community was already overwhelmed with what was happening because of the open border policies that were impacting the town. The mayor had told me that, everyone is packing heat. They're carrying guns. If children play outside, they will be outside with their children and they'll have a gun because things were just not the same since with all these, illegal immigration coming through their town. And so I just can't imagine this on top of it. And I really want to commend all three of you for a great show today, really helping everyone put things in perspective, and especially for your guest, Sissy Goth from Daystar Counseling. What wonderful advice she gave about age-appropriate conversations to have with your children, but also so proud that she brought up prayer, because the spiritual potential of children is something we've ignored as a culture for so long. And Will, you talked so much about the nihilism and the hopelessness in America, and with so many young people and young men in particular. And I don't think that it is not coincidental that all of these shootings have happened at the same time that we see religion and Christian values and Judeo-Christian values declining in our country. Our faith gives us hope. Something is happening with young people. And I remember asking, ever since the time of Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris and Columbine, why we haven't asked more deeper questions about what was happening in that family with those children. We never really get to the bottom of it. We see studies about shrimps on treadmills and, think about the kind of money that was wasted with COVID on schools. Why aren't we getting to the bottom of what is happening in American families and with young men, as you mentioned, Will? We have to get to those answers instead of the easy answers. There's no substitute for families. Government is a very poor substitute for that.
Oh, there it is. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. There it is. Thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers. That's what we need right now. We're a godless nation. And I'm out of focus. I'm back. I'm there. I'm back. I'm there. I'm back. I'm there. I'm back. Well, I apologize, guys. I'll get this straightened as best as I can. But the thing I want to point out really a lot is literally the whole idea of thoughts and prayers. Because that's what it comes. That's what kills me about all of this. That for the simple fact of the matter is that that's where they stick with. They stick with the whole thing of, oh, well, we've gotten away from our faith. We don't know what's going on in these families. We don't know this. You didn't care. The hypocriticism of so-called Christians and religious folks always amazes me. That, thoughts and prayers, that's what's going to get us through this. We've gotten away from that. That's the problem. No. The problem is we've ignored the rash that's been in America since people love guns. We've ignored that rash, and now it's spread. It's no longer small. It's not can't be done by a cream anymore. Now at this point, we might have to cut out some things. That's just the truth. And again, the icing on the cake. I know the previous one was icing on cake, but this one that I'm about to play from Laura Ingram's show, one of the three heads of Hydra decides to bring someone on her show, and what he said was completely crazy.
The fact that we are still having these conversations about just putting barriers in place to make it harder for someone to gain access to a school, whether it's an intercom or bulletproof glass or one security officer. It is quite stunning that that's still in many communities. Maybe it's budget, maybe it's a desire. I don't know, but they still don't have those safety mechanisms in place.
Oh, and what I advocate a lot is, because I get a lot of messages from parents, it's the parents. It's your responsibility where you send your children to school. You have to know now after these shootings, and every week there's a shooting, whether it's at a school or in a supermarket, that you need to check where your kids go to school. You need to go back to the school and see, is there a single point of entry? Do you have guards at the school? I got a message tonight, made me feel kind of good from someone. They told me thanks. They thanked me because they listened to me, and they took their kid out of public school and put him in a private school, because a lot of these private schools, they take security way more serious. So parents, it's your responsibility where you bring your children, and you have to know.
Andrew is exactly right. And the politicians have rushed out tonight. And again, they're still accounting for missing children. And the politicians rushed out.
Okay, so I had to stop it right there, because apparently in his mind, parents, it's up to you to find better schools so that your kids don't get shot. Because he's like, well, I am so glad that I turned around and I put my kids in a private school to avoid all this. It amazes me. And it's like, you guys will say everything down the road except the right answer. But I expect that from conservatives. I do. I expect that from conservatives. Democrats, while it's outside of Beto O'Rourke and a few and AOC and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, they have all came out on Twitter and said that we've been wanting to demand gun reform, and that in order to do that right now, in a slim majority, they do need Republicans. But again, one name that seems to stick out like the evil villain out of any Marvel DC movie, he rears his ugly head again because he hated women. Now he hates kids. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Joe Manchin.
To lead to change, do you think?
I sure hope so. Let me just say this. First of all, I don't think there's not one of us in this, right here in this gathering, that's not moved. If you're not moved, I have 3 grandchildren in that age group that could have been in that school. We all have someone in our family that could be in that position, your children or grandchildren. To think that innocent children can be just slaughtered, this doesn't make any, I mean, that's just beyond my conception that this could happen in the United States of America. Something has to be done. And I'm the first to say that. And we have to reach across the bench, but we can't politicize it. It has to be done in such a practical way. It just makes sense. We have Democrats and Republicans that have had different ideas and good legislation. I've been working on Manchin-Toomey for many, many years. But there's other senators, too, on the Republican side that had some ideas that we could all incorporate into one good, holistic type of piece of legislation. And everybody talks about, oh, you can't get this or you can't get that or get rid of the filibuster here or do this. If we can't get 70 or 75 senators that won't vote to have a common sense protection of your children and grandchildren, what in the world are we here for? What's your purpose for being in the United States Senate if it's not at least to protect?
Okay, so I had to stop Joe Manchin right there because he really said a bunch of bullshit, but really didn't give an answer. I'm sorry, Joe, but for the man who literally voted against women's rights, do I really want to trust the person to come in and say we're going to finally get something done on gun reform? Considering the fact that, yes, not too long ago, there was a bill that was put in, a domestic terrorism bill that Democrats did submit in that the GOP knocked down. Literally came up in a 47-47 vote, which failed to overcome a filibuster. You know what it was? The Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act. Again, that act will require federal law enforcement agencies to regularly evaluate, take steps to address the threats posed by white supremacists and other violent domestic extremists. It passed the House, and yet at the same time failed in the Senate. Again, would you like to know the ones that because the simple fact that not all Democrats voted for it, there are actually some that voted against it. You guessed it, Joe Manchin voted against that very same bill. So it amazes me so that, of course, you get them. Joe Manchin, he believed in this fairy tale of bipartisanship, which isn't going to work with the current Congress class. Even though Mark Rubio, again, another Republican who was also pushing a bill, which he wasted no time in letting people know about.
And it's we continue to see it play out. So the question is, what do you do about it? And I think the answer is you do things that actually would make a difference, that would actually have a chance of preventing these things, like the School Safety Act that we're going to try to pass later today, that we know works. Like I have a bill that creates a grant program so that states encourage states to take up red flag laws, like what we had in Florida, where over 5,000 individuals have been identified and potentially prevented these mass events from happening. From what we know so far, and we'll learn more, this individual turned 18, walked into a store, passed a background check. Because generally, in most of these cases, they will pass background checks because the first time they commit a crime, it's these horrific acts.
But why not just expand the background checks to more commercial sales? Even if it doesn't prevent every tragedy, it could surely present.
Well, every commercial sale requires a background check.
Gun shows and
well, there hasn't been a single of these mass shootings that have been purchased at a gun show or on the internet. So if people want to do it, we can have that debate, but don't link it to these horrible events because they would have nothing to do with it. They wouldn't have prevented them. If he would have passed the background check at a gun show and at any of these other internet, because he hasn't committed a crime until the day he did, and then it was a horrible crime.
I love when see, this is what I believe. I believe in fact-checking politicians on site. That was beautiful. The fact that he sat there and said, well, all should stay in background checks to commercial sales like gun and trade knife shows. Oh, we're already doing that. No, we're not. Oh, you can literally see the wheels that says like, oh shit, find something else. Oh, his guns are purchased legally. I mean, we never had one where it was purchased from a gun knife show or a gun knife trade show, and it was used in a mass shooting. So there's that. He backpedaled because he knew at that point, which a lot of people do know, background checks are not done at a lot of these gun knife trade shows. Background checks are not done. Hate to break it to you guys. I live in Tennessee. I know this for a fact in Tennessee. Anytime Tennessee, especially east of Cookeville, for all those that know about Tennessee, pretty much East Tennessee toward the mountains and back. Toward the mountains all the way over to the North Carolina, South Carolina borders. Those gun knife shows that they have, no background checks are done. You don't want to know why bad guys are why they're not worried about bad guys getting guns illegally? Because a lot of those of the criminal element have figured out, hey, all we got to do is drive to Knoxville or drive over East Tennessee, find a gun knife trade show, bring money, bring IDs, no problem. Just like driver's licenses in Tennessee, relatively easy to get because there's very little overhead and work to get it. Hence why they're saying extending background checks to commercial sales. Gun knife trade shows fall under commercial sales. That is why, as we call it, closing the loophole. And of course, Marco Rubio did actually point out, well, it hasn't had a shooting where it wasn't purchased. I said it amazed me so because I want to say, well, what does that got to do with anything? Because technically, it still means that it was purchased legally. The whole idea of bad guys not getting a hold of certain guns illegally doesn't make any sense when they can purchase it legally under current laws at a gun, knife, and trade show. Again, Tennessee, progressively backwards along with other states. Because again, Texas is the same way. Loosest laws. You ever wonder, it's almost like the Chicago argument that I brought up at the beginning of this. It's the same Chicago argument that is brought up that that conservatives love to use against gun advocates, but not realizing the fact that the looser the laws are, the greater the threat that something can happen. Ergo, Texas. Being that said, though, he did actually bring up a law that he said the School Safety Act, for all those that don't know. And again, this is conservative at its finest. He's talking about this law, the Luke and Alex School Safety Act of 2021. Now, what's basically happening here, guys, just to give you an idea, this bill requires the Department of Homeland Security to establish a federal clearinghouse on school safety best practices for use by state and local education, law enforcement agencies, institutions of higher education, health professionals, and the public. It requires them to collect clearinghouse data analytics, user feedback on the implementation of best practices, and recommendations identified by the clearinghouse, and any evaluations conducted on these best practices and recommendations. In addition, they must coordinate with the Department of Education, Health and Human Services, and Justice to assess and identify best practices and recommendations, and establish an advisory board to provide feedback and propose additional recommendations. Now, what does all that mean? That basically means that you're going to put it upon DHS to figure out action plans for every school and every city and every state. Doesn't sound like a lot of ideas. It sounds like you're basically delegating this down to them saying, here, you guys figure it out, and then tell them what to do. And they wonder why that bill is still sitting in limbo. Guys, the whole point of the shooting is just simple fact of the matter is that yes, an individual has figured out how to get a hold of firearms legally, because that's the big thing now. The big thing now is not illegal firearms being purchased; it's that they're legal. As I said before, in Texas, if you're 18 years old, you can still at this point buy a firearm. You can't buy alcohol because you're not 21, but you can buy a gun, which is astoundingly redundant to me. At the same time, yes, there's plenty of things that can be done. We could start doing universal background checks. We could require annual mandatory training. We could require mental health screenings. We could require deep background check. We could actually extend background checks to commercial sales like gun night trade shows. We could actually reinforce our private sales to be done at an FF licensed location or at a police station, just to make sure everything's nice and neat. We could have a national registry, so whenever guns and ammo is purchased, we know exactly who to look at. We could establish red flags laws, which again are the laws that where local authorities can step in and remove firearms from a person that is deemed dangerous. Again, and at the same time, over 80% of all Americans at this point still support universal background checks. And that's just the beginning. I always said it best, and it was also said to Ted Cruz, and I kind of forgot about that. We'll give me 1 second because I wanted to play this before we get over to our next story, before we get to our feel good segment, because again, I have to give this person absolute credit for going to Ted Cruz and bringing up the obvious, and I do mean the obvious, because he asked a question, which again I thought was fracking perfect. And it need to be said that why is it only in America? And I love how he said this. He goes and says, why in America are we the only group out there that has we're the only country out there that has school shootings? Because every other place that's had a school shooting, they put in a law. They've actually put restrictions on there, and at the same time, they were able to move forward with no problem. No school shootings after that. Australia, no problem. Britain, no problem. But only in America do they turn around and they sit there and say, no. And I wish I could make this up, but as I'm bringing this up, give me 1 second, guys. But as I'm bringing this up, I just thought this was brilliant. Check it out.
Enough is enough. This is horrific. I've introduced legislation to say schools like this elementary school behind me can get federal grants to harden their security, to put in bulletproof doors, bulletproof glass, to put in armed police officers to protect kids. This is frustrating here. This mass murderer came in through an unlocked door in the back of the school. Do you want to talk about how we could have prevented the horror that played out across the street? We talked about what we need to do to harden schools, including not having unlocked back doors.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue. But why does this only happen in your country? I really think that's what many people around the world they cannot fathom. Why only in America? Why is this American exceptionalism so awful?
You know, I'm sorry you think American exceptionalism is awful.
I think this aspect of it.
You got your political agenda.
No, it's honestly,
God love you.
Senator, it's not. I just want to understand.
That's the part where I was laughing about, y'all. That it was amazing to me that Ted Cruz, of all people, literally and figuratively was just asked a simple question, and he couldn't answer it. But he was like, "Oh, you got your political agenda." It's not politics. Only conservatives. Only keep in mind, this is a conservative tactic. This is not something done by Democrats or progressives or independents. This is only something done by conservatives. The same people that are crying about division divide. The same people that are crying about being persecuted are the ones doing the persecution. The same ones who are sitting there saying everything is a political agenda are making it a political agenda. And this is what GOP conservatives are doing right now. They are defending Daddy NRA because Daddy NRA is still paying them. Until NRA is gone, unfortunately, and its remnants are destroyed, they will still have their influence, because that's the thing about gun control. For a lot of guys don't remember, there was actually a bill that was submitted that the CDC would study the history of the American people and their love affair with guns. The NRA spent buku bucks of money into politicians to kill that bill from ever going out. Now you ask yourself that question. What is so scary about a CDC bill looking into mental health and firearms that the NRA did not want? In America, of all places. And again, going back to Ted Cruz, he's like, what is it about America? Why only in America these school shootings do happen? It's happened everywhere else, so it's stopping the heartbeat, but only in America is allowed to continue. Well, you just have your political agenda, so I'm just going to leave it there. Ted Cruz, ladies and gentlemen, the embodiment of what the GOP is. Bought and paid for. But the only other story I know, guys, we did kind of stick on the Robb Elementary shooting a lot, but we did have another story that I did want to bring up. Also, I brought this up during the midweek review. Basically, I've never thought we would get to the point to where I would see this happen in a church setting where a preacher did admit rape, but decided to call it adultery. Why? Because rape has jail time. Adultery does not.
This Facebook live stream starts with what you'd typically see at a Sunday service.
Please come up after the end of the service. We have some people.
After the prayers, an announcement from the pastor, who starts by introducing himself.
In case you don't know, I'm Pastor John Lowe, and
After that applause, he gets to his confession.
I have an announcement for you. It's called a confession. I committed adultery. It was nearly 20 years ago. It continued far too long. It involved one person, and there's been no other, nor any other situations of unbecoming conduct for the last 20 years.
Lowe says he didn't make a misjudgment, he sinned, and then addresses why he didn't say anything until now.
The answer? There is no good answer. I told myself for years silence served to protect everyone, the other person, those closest to her, from the hurt and from the public embarrassment. And I'd like to think that was true. But the truth is that silence was to protect myself as well.
He tells his congregation he's confessed his sin to his wife and family.
To you, the church, I repent for the adultery and my silence. Please forgive me.
The congregation applauds again. Then a woman and her husband come to the microphone.
I lived in a prison of lies and shame, lying to protect the Lowe family. For years, I thought I was a horrible person having suicidal thoughts, not realizing what had been truly done to me, that I was a victim.
She says 2 weeks ago, her brother told her what he remembered as a teenager.
That bothered him all these years. His pastor in bed with his younger sister, a t-shirt and underwear on. I'm a prisoner no longer. I was just 16 when you took my virginity on your office floor. Do you remember that? I know you do, and I have plenty of other stories that I could bring to your remembrance.
The woman in the video says she is holding off on an interview right now. I spoke with a former member of the church who is now living in New York. He praised her courage.
That took an immense amount of strength, and she should be applauded, because the amount of vulnerability and the breaking through and the resilience to shame had to be strong in that moment.
Before wrapping things up, Pastor Lowe addresses the woman's age at the time.
She was 16 years old, Jay. Okay, and it was wrong. I can't say it. I can't make it right. I can't make it any better. That's just the way it is.
The former church member we talked with spoke about what happened at the end of the video. When the pastor finished speaking, many in the crowd gathered around him and prayed.
But the congregation should have, in a sense, turned their back on them and said, we understand that you're saying what you did was wrong, but she was the one that needed solace and comforting in that moment.
Every time I watch that video, I'm just like, One of the main issues I have with organized religion is the fact that he kept on repeating the word, I committed adultery. I committed adultery. I committed it. He didn't sit there and say what he should have said, which was realistically, I raped her. 16 years old. 16 years old. I said, now, if I was her father and I found out that the pastor raped my daughter, I'd be in jail. Oh, he'd be seeing Jesus. He'll be seeing Jesus. I'll be sitting in jail with a smile on my face. That's just me. But he kept on saying the entire time, well, I wish I could make this right. You can make this right by going to the police and confessing, by actually seeing your day in court, to actually be judged by a jury of your own peers, or as the Bible says, obey the laws of the land. But Christians. That being said, guys, we are going to move on to our feel-good segment, because Lord knows we definitely could use one this week. We usually have a friend guy here. We usually cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom, since I think we lose faith in humanity. But hey, it is the weekend. It is Memorial Day weekend. So let's have Monday off. Hopefully you can enjoy it hopefully you can enjoy that well-deserved day off, because, working this hard and everything's going up at your paycheck. But, on the show, we do like to end it by sending out good vibes, by putting you guys on a good note. And we had 4 stories, because after all this, the 3 weren't going to cut it. We went up to 4. This story I did actually show during the midweek review again of history being made. Representation definitely does matter, because these group of people have done something I'll never do. Climb and conquer Mount Everest.
Finally tonight, America Strong, the historic journey to the top of the world. 7 American climbers made history last week. The first all-black team to reach the summit of Mount Everest, 29,000 feet up. The team, known as Full Circle Everest, includes a high school science teacher, an Iraq War vet, and a small business owner. Their mission, to showcase Black athletes and remove barriers.
The main reason why this is important, historically, Black and brown people haven't been in these areas and environments, especially not on the highest point of the world.
After months of training, the 11-person group arrived at base camp 4 weeks ago, setting up at 17,000 feet.
This is where we live for 2 months while we're getting ready to climb the tallest mountain in the world.
Spending their days out on the mountain training at altitude, then back in their tents thinking of loved ones at home. Phil Henderson led the expedition.
Yeah, this is a rest day in base camp. I took my wedding ring off because my hands swell up, so that's the last thing I see before I leave my tent, is my wedding ring.
36 days after beginning their climb, mission accomplished. Their success nearly doubling the total number of Black climbers to ever ascend the highest point on Earth. Full Circle Everest, entering the history books, inspiring the next generation. What an accomplishment.
Yeah, definitely an accomplishment. And like I said, it's one of those things, like I said, representation matters, and the fact of the matter, that definitely does matter, to actually see people doing something that a lot of people don't necessarily see Black people doing. So definitely kudos to them on that and climbing one of the highest points in the world. But woof, I'm with y'all in spirit. The next story I got, guys, is actually one that you probably see before somewhere on social media, but I have to play this as well because this young woman had proven the whole idea, and that to me is the embodiment of not giving up or not saying it's over till it's over. She literally proved it.
The little girl who started the race and then lost her shoe, but not her spirit. Just watch this 7-year-old who loses her shoe. Talaya Crawford goes back for that shoe, puts it on, keeps running.
She ran out her shoe. Go, Talaya. Go, Lay-Lay. Go, Lay-Lay. Go, Lay-Lay. Let's go, Lay-Lay. Good job, Lay-Lay. Let's go, Lay-Lay. Let's go, Lay-Lay. Let's go, Lay-Lay. Let's go, Lay-Lay. Lay-Lay. Let's go, Talaya. Let's go, Talaya. Come on, mama. Let's go, Talaya. Let's go, Talaya. Let's go, Talaya.
You could hear her family, her loved ones, amazed. Not only did she keep going, she won the race. Talaya's father, Terrence, a professional boxer, writing, "I just can't stop thinking about my daughter's track meet. She doesn't have a clue how much she just motivated me. This is the definition of not giving up, heart and grit." And tonight,
Hi, everybody.
Talaya with this message of thanks.
I just wanted to thank y'all for supporting me and sharing my video.
Talaya's family telling us tonight they hope this inspires others to work hard and to get to the finish line. Because their Talaya never gave up. Yeah, that is just incredible.
Again, that's awesome. I mean, that first and foremost, that little girl was moving like everybody else was standing still. That's the crazy part. That's the part I was like, she just sat there and literally and figuratively was running, and everybody else, I mean, y'all saw it. I mean, picked up her shoe, got up and running. It's like everybody else was running. Everybody else was like jogging. But kudos to that young girl. And, like I said, if you decide to keep it up, I'm looking for you in the Olympics along with that other girl in gymnastics that we talked about a few weeks ago. Another story I got, guys, because, again, we are all for heartfelt reunions. And right now, the world could use a lot more heartfelt reunions. This brother decided to go the extra mile to basically be with his sister at her graduation.
Graduation surprise, America strong. The college graduation, senior Ladira Light, the surprise note from her brother.
I received a letter, an email again, from Ladera Light.
Oh, God.
He said, I want you to tell my sister how proud I am, how gracious she is, how superlative that she is. And I know that she is going to do amazing things in her life. She is one in a million with a special talent of knowing just how to move forward. And the letter goes on and on and on. But let me do this, Ladira. Talk to him about it.
She had no idea it wasn't just the letter. Her brother, Ladero, was right there too. He'd been deployed with the U.S. Army Reserve. And right here tonight,
Hey, David.
Ladira, the new grad, on that moment.
That was literally everything to me. Like, that was the best gift that I could have ever gotten.
Hey, David. And Specialist Light telling us he just couldn't miss this moment.
It was a really important moment for her. And growing up, we were always there for each other's big moments.
A moment Central Michigan University won't soon forget. The brother, his note, his surprise visit. Congratulations.
I don't care what you say. You can. Hey, there's nothing wrong with a good old family reunion and brother and sister love. That's the truth. So the last one I got, guys, again, is last one I have, because like I said, we needed 4 stories after this week. Is good Lord. There is some news. Again, Black history always being made, especially this one, although it's a little outdated, but I still want to share it, about a 19-year-old that has become the youngest Black law school graduate in American history at 19 years old. Check it out.
I am the youngest woman. I am the youngest Black person, so I'm excited to be able to claim it. It's exciting, as you can imagine. It's really cool.
16-year-old who has been accepted to 9 law schools.
Definitely something that has been, a lot of work, a lot of long nights, a lot of, vacations spent working. Crazy. It feels surreal. Don't find your path, you make it. And that's something that I really try, like I said, to express to anybody who will listen to me.
Somebody just don't want us to be great. Well, dang it. I guess somebody doesn't want us to be great. Well, to go ahead and wrap that up, guys, yeah, she did get multiple offers. She has not yet to accept them. But again, to be the youngest law school graduate at 19 years old is definitely an accomplishment. They stomping on our good moment. But you know what? We're going to let that let us shine. But anyway, that's going to do it for our podcast, guys. I do thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know it's up and running. I certainly appreciate it. Excuse me, some shameless plugging before I do get out of here, guys. I do want to start off with guys over at RN Geek Present Geeks Out for allowing me to share my podcast on their page. Sorry about that. You can definitely check them out on YouTube as well as Facebook, RN's Geek Present Geek Salad. Also, shout out to my buddy Vaughn. You can definitely find him, Vaughn Westwood, on Facebook, at Big VZ on all socials, where his shows and times show in there, and new shows definitely coming down the pike, so definitely check that out as well. Also, yours truly, I can be found, IG handle BlackBox447, where I usually do post reviews of movies, video games, television shows, things of that nature, gem stuff, because I do a couple push-ups. At the same time, guys, I'm all about positivity, motivation, and just, trying to light that fire, not only under myself, but hopefully for how others to find it for themselves is really what I'm trying to do here. Beyond that, guys, the ticker that you see at the bottom, let me make that just a little bit bigger. You can definitely copy and paste that into your browser. We'll take you to my link tree that has the Facebook and YouTube groups for all of my podcasts. How the Frack Got Here, Get Bit, of course, the Affluence Podcast. Definitely like, share, and subscribe, and let people know about it. I certainly appreciate that as well. Aside from that, guys, the last thing I'll say is that COVID is still out there. So please wear a mask. Please, above all else, wear a mask. Please, that way, because again, let's try it again. Cases have not gone down at all. Cases are going down, but not to the level we want them at. So we still want to be preventative. We still want to wear masks. We still want to be careful where our surroundings are, because when we take care of ourselves, we take care of each other, and that's how we're going to beat this. So the last thing I'll say, guys, next to last thing, please vote. Midterms are coming up. If there's anything that have shown us, even though the primaries may or may have not happened in your state already, when the midterms do come up in November, please vote. If anything now, it just shows you how crucial it is that the people we vote in to actually be our voice, to be our actual avatars, if you will, in the House and in the Senate, goes show you that whoever we vote in will shape the next 2 years of how America's going to work. So again, the GOP is doing their best to change the goalposts. They're doing their best to go after mail-in voting. They're doing their best to go after minority voters. I have been saying this because it's still true. If voting did not matter, why are they making it so hard for you to exercise it? That's all I'm saying. So definitely please vote. Early vote if you can. The last thing I'll say about how the Frack we got here is all about staying informed. We're not trying to change your mind to reinvent the wheel. We're simply doing what the old news stations try to do. Give you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind for yourself, but provide a logical perspective beside it. We do a lot better when we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like bringing our first Black woman Supreme Court, like bringing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go up by our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians, but still the same old BS in Congress? And most importantly, how the frack we got here. Thank you all for watching, and hopefully you guys have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. Hope to catch you back in the midweek review this Wednesday and other podcast shows. But aside from that, take care of yourselves and each other. We will all get through this. Peace.